The photograph arrived wrapped in plain brown paper, with no return address, no note, no hint of who had sent it. Dr. Evelyn Hart, a historical photography archivist at Emory University, assumed at first that it was another anonymous donation from a hobby collector. But the moment she unfolded the wrapping and saw the girl's face staring back at her, she felt a coldness that did not belong to the room. The portrait was dated roughly to the late 1880s or early 1890s, done in the quiet, formal style common in Georgia studio work of the era. The young woman stood in simple clothing, her posture steady, her expression controlled, but not lifeless. Her eyes, wide and solemn, held something else entirely, a depth of exhaustion, a silence shaped by endurance rather than obedience. Written in faded pencil on the back were 3 words only, Ella Ruth. Property. Evelyn frowned. That word, property, should not have existed in an 1890s photograph. By then slavery had been abolished for decades. No legitimate photographer, no decent person, would label a girl like this as property in any legal sense. Unless, Evelyn thought, the label wasn't meant for legality. She lifted a magnifying loupe to study the girl's clothing. At first glance everything was ordinary, a tight scarf at her neck, a worn but carefully buttoned dress, hair parted in the style typical for rural black women after Reconstruction. But the loupe revealed what the naked eye could not. Tiny abrasions where the fabric met her collarbone, thin, irritated lines that were not part of the printing process. Marks consistent with friction from rope or leather restraints. Evelyn's breath tightened. She moved the loupe lower, scanning the shadows around Ella Ruth's throat, and after adjusting the angle of the lamp, she saw it, barely visible, almost ghost-like beneath the photograph's sepia tones. A faint horizontal welt. Not fresh. Healed. Old. The kind that never completely fades. This was no ordinary portrait. And it wasn't simply a matter of a girl who had once been enslaved. That, tragically, was common enough. What unsettled Evelyn was that this portrait appeared staged, like someone wanted Ella Ruth documented in a specific state, dignified posture, direct gaze, and evidence of her suffering subtly preserved in the shadows. Why would anyone deliberately want that recorded? Who wanted her seen like this? Evelyn turned the photograph over again, tracing her thumb across the penciled words. The handwriting was uneven, written quickly, almost angrily. She checked the envelope for postal markings, none. Whoever sent this knew exactly what they were delivering, and to whom. She carried the photograph to the digital lab and placed it beneath a scanner. As the machine hummed, she adjusted the resolution settings far beyond normal archival protocol. She wanted to capture everything, every mistake in the emulsion, every dust mark, every shadow. When the image appeared on screen at 500% magnification, another detail emerged, something Evelyn hadn't noticed before. Behind Ella Ruth, in the blurred darkness of the background, was a shape. Not a curtain. Not furniture. A structure, tall and vertical. A post. A wooden post. And along its side, barely visible in the sepia haze, were carved grooves, parallel notches. Restraint marks. Evelyn felt her stomach drop. This wasn't a studio portrait at all. Someone had photographed Ella Ruth while she stood in the yard of a Georgia plantation, decades after slavery had ended. And someone had kept the evidence hidden for over 150 years. Evelyn didn't sleep that night. The image of Ella Ruth stayed with her long after she left the lab, those steady eyes, that quiet defiance, and the unmistakable presence of violence hidden behind her. By morning she knew she needed help. She called the one person who understood the deep undercurrents of post-emancipation Georgia better than anyone she knew. Dr. Samuel Whitaker, a Reconstruction-era specialist, arrived with his usual unhurried stride. He was a quiet man, soft-spoken, but there was nothing gentle about the precision with which he dissected history. Evelyn laid the photograph before him. He studied it for far longer than she expected. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "Where did this come from?" "No sender." "No note," Evelyn said. "It was left for me." Whitaker nodded slowly, eyes fixed on Ella Ruth's face. "This girl, she's not posing for a studio photographer. She's being recorded. Documented. As if someone wanted proof she still existed. Evelyn felt the words sink in. But why the notches behind her? Why the marks on her neck? Whitaker exhaled, leaning back. Because the abolition of slavery didn't end the system, it simply forced it into the shadows. Many plantations in rural Georgia continued operating with illegal convict leasing, forced labor, debt bondage. The law barely reached those places. Girls like her, he tapped the photo gently. They disappeared into those systems without ever being seen again. Evelyn looked again at the faint pencil inscription, Ella Ruth. Property. Could she have been one of those hidden laborers? Whitaker shook his head. This is different. Look at her expression. She knows she's being watched, but she isn't broken. This girl was resisting something. He paused, then motioned toward the scratches around her collar. You see these marks? They're not random. That's a restraint used on women who tried to escape repeatedly. Plantation owners carved notches on posts to track recaptures. Evelyn felt the room tilt slightly. So those notches, she whispered, belonged to her? Or to the others before her, Whitaker replied grimly. A post like that could hold dozens of stories. None of them voluntary. They fell into silence. Finally Evelyn asked, what about the date? Why would someone still be restraining a woman like this in the 1890s? Whitaker moved the lamp closer. Because some men believed emancipation was optional. There were plantation enclaves in Georgia, isolated, self-governed, protected by secrecy and generational loyalty. They didn't free people because no one forced them to. He leaned in again, tracing a faint shadow near Ella Ruth's left shoulder. What's that? He murmured. Evelyn zoomed in on the digital scan. The shadow that clung to her shoulder now appeared to have a shape, angular, metallic. A latch. A hinge. Not from clothing. From a door. Whitaker stiffened. This wasn't taken outdoors. This was taken at the entrance of a holding cellar. A sickening possibility formed between them. Someone had photographed Ella Ruth right before she was taken back inside. This looks like evidence, Evelyn whispered. Or a warning, Whitaker murmured. Someone wanted the world to know she was still alive when this was taken. And they wanted the world to know who kept her. But the sender didn't tell us who. No, he lifted the photograph again, staring at the back. Which means we need to find them. Evelyn felt a pulse of dread and urgency. If someone had sent this photograph after 150 years, they had a reason. And that reason was not harmless curiosity. Whitaker rose, his expression tightening. We start with the plantation families in Georgia who continued operations after the war. The ones who vanished from records. Those are the men who would have owned a girl like Ella Ruth. Evelyn nodded. And if we find them, she said, we find what happened to her. Whitaker's eyes returned to the image. No, he corrected quietly. If we find them, we find why someone kept her hidden. The next week, Evelyn and Whitaker lived among dust and silence. They set up in the county archive, a brick building that looked more like an abandoned school than the keeper of Georgia's buried past. Ceiling fans turned lazily above rows of gray metal shelves. The air smelled of mildew, old glue, and the faint trace of tobacco that clung to anything stored since the 1920s. Evelyn spread the reproduction of Ella Ruth's portrait on the table between them, using it as their compass. Whitaker attacked the problem from the only direction that made sense, land. Plantations weren't just families, he'd said. They were acreage, tax entries, production reports. Even when people tried to hide what they owned, land has a paper trail. They started with post-war property rolls for the years between 1870 and 1900 in the rural counties south of Atlanta, where cotton still choked the soil and former enslavers quietly continued their operations. On the first day, they found nothing but columns of names and numbers, harvest yields, and mortgage notes. On the second day, something shifted. Here, Whitaker murmured, tapping a brittle ledger from 1889. Look at this. Evelyn leaned over. In narrow, neatly inked script, the page listed several plantations whose yields had abruptly increased in the late 1880s, far beyond what their recorded workforce could have produced. Barrow, Latimer, Hollowell, and one more, a name that repeated across multiple counties with uncanny regularity, Rowanwood. Rowanwood Plantation, Whitaker read. Officially dissolved in 1866. Yet somehow it's paying taxes on record profits in 1888, 1889, 1890, with no registered laborers. That's impossible, Evelyn said. Unless they were using people they didn't register. Exactly. He pulled another ledger toward them, this one an agricultural survey. In the margin of the Rowanwood entry, in faint penciled shorthand, someone had written 3 letters, YAR. Initials? Evelyn whispered, heart suddenly pounding. Ella Ruth? Could be, Whitaker said. Or coincidence. But archivists don't leave marks for nothing. Someone was trying to call attention to this. They requested access to the county courthouse basement, where old court records and miscellaneous filings were stored. The clerk warned them the room flooded every few years and no one had properly cataloged its contents in decades. They went anyway. The basement was more crawlspace than room, with one bare bulb that flickered nervously as they descended the narrow stairs. Water stains climbed the cement walls. Cardboard boxes slumped on warped wooden shelves. Mold bloomed in the corners of forgotten binders. Evelyn pulled on gloves and eased open the nearest box. Inside, bundles of crumbling paper lay tied with string. She untied one and carefully unfolded a packet, copies of labor contracts signed between plantation owners and freedmen. Except these were different. The signatures of the workers were shaky, some only marked with an X. The terms listed room, board, medical care in exchange for labor, but the duration line was chilling, term, indefinite. Termination only at owner's discretion. These are slavery contracts, Evelyn said, voice tight. Debt peonage, Whitaker corrected softly. It was illegal, but it thrived where no one asked questions. He rifled deeper into the box. Near the bottom, he found a folded sheet on thicker paper. Across the top, in decorative script, it read, Rowanwood Estate, Domestic Staff Allotment, 1887. Evelyn stepped closer. The document listed 15 names. Most were first names only, Sarah, Jonah, Mabel, Jacob, followed by their assigned roles in the big house. Under kitchen, a name jumped out at her, Ella Ruth, scullery/personal attendant. There was a notation beside her name, added later in darker ink, prone to disobedience. Observe closely. Beneath that, almost scratched into the paper, refuses to forget she is free. Evelyn heard her own heartbeat in her ears. Ella Ruth was no longer just a face. She was a person fixed in the machinery of Rowanwood, pushing back against it. Look at the bottom, Whitaker said. There, in smaller writing, was a line that did not match the rest of the neat script. Someone else's hand, hastily added, November 1891, transferred to lower quarters after second escape attempt. Lower quarters, Evelyn murmured. That sounds like a euphemism. For punishment, Whitaker said. Or for being disappeared. They searched for more. Behind the Rowanwood sheet were several letters, all written between 1885 and 1892, all addressed to the same man, Judge Alastair Rowan, owner of Rowanwood Plantation and member of the local county commission. Most were mundane, requests about supply deliveries, legal advice, land disputes. But one undated letter caught Evelyn's eye. The ink had bled from water damage, but the opening line remained clear, Sir, I have made the photograph as instructed. The girl was made presentable, though the marks at her neck could not be fully concealed. Evelyn's throat went dry. She skimmed the rest. The writer complained about the difficulty of using portable equipment on the estate grounds, but reassured Rowan that no identifying structures of the house are visible, only the post as per your request. The letter ended with a promise to deliver the plate personally, so that no outside eyes may misunderstand the arrangement. Whitaker stared at the page. This is about her. About the photograph. They staged it, Evelyn whispered. They posed Ella Ruth in front of that post on purpose. Rowan ordered it. Why? To taunt someone? To show control? Or to record ownership, Evelyn said slowly. Like branding cattle. A visual claim. Silence fell between them, heavy and ugly. Then Whitaker pointed to the last line, nearly lost in the water stains. Once the girl has been properly dealt with, I advise destroying the plate. No good can come of such evidence. But someone had not destroyed it. Someone had kept it. Carried it through generations. And now, after more than a century, that evidence had landed in Evelyn Hart's hands. She folded the letter carefully, feeling a shiver race along her skin. Rowan Wood, she said. We have the name. We have the judge. We have proof he photographed her. Whitaker nodded grimly. There's only one thing left to do. Evelyn knew what he meant before he said it. We go there. Rowan Wood sat 30 miles south of Macon, but the landscape changed long before Evelyn and Whitaker reached the property line. The paved highway narrowed into a cracked county road. Branches hung low, heavy with moss, forming a tunnel that swallowed daylight. The GPS lost signal. Mailboxes disappeared. Houses became sparse, then vanished entirely. It felt less like driving into history and more like driving into a place that had refused to leave it. This area never rebuilt after Reconstruction, Whitaker murmured, scanning the endless tree line. Places like this survived on secrecy. When the law came, the law was turned away. Evelyn gripped the photograph in her lap. Ella Ruth's eyes seemed even more alive out here, as if the land itself still remembered her. The Rowanwood estate appeared suddenly, a long, skeletal silhouette behind rusted gates that leaned crookedly in the dirt. The main house, once grand, was now hollowed by time. Its columns bowed inward, and vines crawled through shattered windows like veins reclaiming a corpse. Evelyn stepped out of the car. The air was dense with heat and silence. This place is untouched, she whispered. Whitaker nodded. That's what worries me. They walked through the open gates, their feet stirring decades of leaves. As they approached the house, Evelyn noticed something carved into one of the sagging porch pillars, deep vertical notches, worn by weather but still disturbingly visible. The same pattern as in the photograph. Her stomach tightened. Inside, dust coated everything. The floorboards groaned under their weight. Through cracked wallpaper, Evelyn saw glimpses of older, darker paint, layers covering layers, as if the house had been trying for generations to bury its own memories. They found the parlor first. Broken chairs. A collapsed piano. Faded portraits tilted on the walls, their subjects obscured by mold and grime. Whitaker used a flashlight to scan the frames, stopping at one where the glass had been smashed inward. Someone removed this intentionally, he said. Recently. Evelyn knelt and lifted a scrap of canvas from the floor. The edge was torn clean, as though someone had cut the portrait out in a hurry. Could it have been another image of Ella Ruth? She asked. Or someone Rowan wanted forgotten, Whitaker replied. These families often kept evidence of their power, photographs, ledgers, letters. Evelyn paused. Unless someone else came here before us. Someone who knew what to look for. Whitaker's expression darkened. They continued deeper into the house. Each room felt colder than the last, though the Georgia heat pressed against the windows outside. At the end of a narrow corridor, they found a door with a heavy iron latch, old, but not rusted shut. Someone had oiled it. Evelyn exchanged a look with Whitaker. This is the cellar door, he said quietly. The word cellar echoed through Evelyn's memory, Rowan's letters, the note on the domestic staff sheet, the terrifying line about the lower quarters. Whitaker unlatched the door. A wave of cold air exhaled from the darkness below. The stairs descended steeply. Their flashlight beams cut through the dust like knives. Halfway down, Evelyn felt her pulse quicken. Something was carved into the wall beside the steps, initials, gouged deep and uneven, ER. Her breath caught. Whitaker traced the letters with shaking fingers. She was here, he whispered. Ella Ruth carved this herself. They reached the bottom. The cellar was larger than expected, stone walls, dirt floor, a low ceiling supported by thick wooden beams. And in the center stood a tall post. The post. The same one from the photograph. The same grooves, the same scars, the same cruel, methodical notches. Evelyn approached it slowly, every step a protest from her body. When she touched the wood, a chill sh*t through her. The grooves were smooth from years of use. Too many years. Whitaker walked toward a cluster of rotted crates in the corner. There's something here, he said. He pulled aside debris, revealing a hidden compartment dug into the earth. Inside was a box, metal, dented, but still intact. Evelyn knelt beside him. Together they forced the lid open. Inside lay several glass photographic plates wrapped in crumbling cloth. Evelyn's breath trembled. Are these? She lifted the top plate into the flashlight beam. It was Ella Ruth. But not the image they knew. This was earlier. Her face was bruised. Her hair disheveled. She stood in the same collar, but her expression was different, defiant in a way that bordered on dangerous. Behind her, a man's hand gripped her shoulder. His face was out of frame, but his ring, an ornate signet, caught the light. Whitaker inhaled sharply. That ring. That's Judge Rowan. Evelyn reached for the next plate. This one showed Ella Ruth restrained to the post, her wrists bound, her eyes furious yet unbroken. On the edge of the frame, carved into the wood, freshly cut at the time of the image, were the topmost notches. Not just a few. Many. These aren't records of punishment, Whitaker said softly. These are records of control. Of someone trying to document a spirit they couldn't break. And someone kept them, Evelyn said. Someone hid these plates instead of destroying them like Rowan ordered. Whitaker nodded. Which means there was a witness. Someone inside Rowanwood who didn't agree with what happened here. Evelyn carefully wrapped the plates again. Whitaker, she said, her voice just above a whisper, if these plates survived, something else might have survived with them. He looked at her. Such as? The truth about what happened to Ella Ruth. Before Whitaker could answer, a soft sound echoed from the floor above. Footsteps. Slow. Intentional. Not the house settling. Someone else was inside Rowanwood. And they were not alone in the dark. The footsteps above were neither hurried nor hesitant. They moved with certainty, someone who knew the layout of the old house, someone who didn't bother to hide their presence. Evelyn froze where she stood, one hand still gripping the wrapped photographic plates. Whitaker extinguished the flashlight instantly, plunging the cellar into suffocating darkness. For several seconds, the only sound was Evelyn's heartbeat thudding in her ears. Then, another step. Closer. Floorboards groaning beneath deliberate weight. Whitaker leaned close enough that she felt his breath. Don't move. They waited, counting each creak overhead. Whoever was up there seemed to be circling the floor directly above the cellar, pausing at intervals, as though listening for something beneath them. Evelyn's mind raced. The photograph had arrived anonymously. The plates survived when they should have been destroyed. And now someone else was here, at the exact moment she and Whitaker uncovered them. This wasn't coincidence. Someone had been following their search. The footsteps stopped. Silence pressed in all around them. Then a new sound, the unmistakable metal click of the cellar latch sliding into place. Whitaker inhaled sharply. They're locking us in. Evelyn's pulse surged. The cellar held only one exit, the stairs. If someone sealed them inside, Rowanwood would become a tomb. A shadow moved at the top of the staircase, a faint outline against the sliver of light leaking under the door. It lingered for a moment, as if confirming something. Then the light vanished altogether. The door had shut, and they were alone in the dark once more. Whitaker relit the flashlight, its beam shaky in his hand. "We need another way out. Look for ventilation shafts, abandoned chutes, anything." As they searched the cellar, Evelyn kept glancing at the stairs, half expecting the door to burst open. The old wood of the house groaned, but the footsteps did not return. Near the far wall, Whitaker knelt beside a cluster of stones. "Help me with this." Together they pushed aside loose bricks, revealing a narrow recess. Inside lay a bundle wrapped in canvas, stiffened by age. Evelyn hesitated, then pulled the covering back. Letters. Dozens of them. All addressed to the same person, Miss Clara Rowan. "Rowan's daughter," Whitaker said. "She lived here during the late 1880s. Evelyn opened the first letter cautiously. Written in careful, looping script, it began, "Father is not the man he once was. What he does to the girl is not discipline, it is cruelty born from fear. She defies him. She reminds him the world has changed and left him behind." Evelyn looked at Whitaker. Clara knew. She opened another. "I saw him order the photograph. I heard him say she must be made an example. But I cannot watch this any longer. I will hide the plates. I will hide whatever proof I can." Whitaker exhaled slowly. Clara preserved the evidence. She must have known what would happen to Ella Ruth. Evelyn unfolded a third letter, its ink smudged as though from tears. She tried again to run. "I warned her the ravine path was watched, but she refused to stay. Better to die free," she said. "I helped her reach the tree line, but Father's men found us. They dragged her back to the post. I could not stop it. I could only bear witness." The words blurred before Evelyn's eyes. Ella Ruth hadn't given up. She had fought, again and again, even knowing the consequences. Another letter lay beneath the rest, sealed with a cracked wax stamp. Evelyn broke it open. "This will be my last. Father has ordered the lower quarters sealed after tonight. He says no one must enter again. He believes what he has done will remain buried. But I have hidden the truth. If anyone ever finds this, know the girl's name was Ella Ruth. She deserved freedom. She deserved life." Evelyn pressed the letter against her chest. The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls themselves mourned. Whitaker found another object tucked behind the bundle, a small metal tag on a broken cord. The engraving read, "ER, 1891 A labor tag." Except this one was snapped in half, as if someone, Ella Ruth herself, had broken it. "She destroyed her own tag," Whitaker said quietly. "She refused the identity they forced on her." Evelyn nodded, swallowing hard. "And Clara tried to help her. Tried to save something of her. These letters, they're a confession." Whitaker placed the broken tag in Evelyn's hand. "This is the second layer. Not just abuse. Not just forced labor. A struggle between Ella Ruth and the Rowan family for her freedom. And someone," Evelyn whispered, "never forgave Clara for it." A sudden thud struck the cellar door. Evelyn jerked her head toward the stairs. Whitaker steadied her with a hand. "They're still here." The thud came again. But this time it wasn't the sound of someone trying to enter. It was the sound of something being placed on the other side. Something heavy. "They're barricading it," Whitaker murmured. "They want us trapped. And they want the evidence buried again." Evelyn looked around the cellar, panic rising. "If we don't get out, Rowanwood will bury us just like it buried her." Whitaker's eyes hardened with determination. "Then we find the way Clara intended. She hid the plates. She hid the letters. She must have had an escape path too." Evelyn lifted the flashlight toward the stone wall behind the post. And that was when she saw it, a faint outline carved into the stones. A rectangle. A doorway. Sealed, but not entirely. The hidden exit. The last secret Clara Rowan left behind. The outline in the stone wasn't obvious at first glance. Time had tried to erase it, mortar smeared along the edges, dust thick in the seams, but up close, in the harsh cone of the flashlight, the lines were undeniable. A rectangle. Almost door-sized. Deliberately filled in. Clara, Whitaker murmured, running his gloved fingers along the faint groove. She marked this. She wanted someone to see it. Evelyn pressed her palm against the cold stone. If the upstairs door is blocked, this might be our only way out. Whitaker took a breath, then looked around. We need leverage. Something to pry with. They scavenged the cellar, rusted hooks, a warped length of iron, an abandoned shovel caked with earth that had long since turned to stone. Working together, they wedged the metal into a narrow crack between rocks and heaved. At first nothing moved. Then, with a grinding sigh, one of the stones shifted, a fraction of an inch, then another. Dust cascaded down, filling the air with the smell of damp earth and lime. Again, Whitaker said through clenched teeth. They pulled and pushed, muscles burning, until finally one of the blocks loosened enough for Whitaker to yank it free. Behind it, beneath the rubble, lay a hollow space, a narrow, black throat of passage. A hidden tunnel. Evelyn angled the flashlight into the opening. Rough-hewn earth walls descended at a gentle slope, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. This isn't a formal escape tunnel, Whitaker said. This is desperate work. Someone dug this with whatever they had. Clara, Evelyn whispered. Or Ella Ruth. Or both. A thud sounded above again, something heavy scraping across the floorboards near the cellar door. Dust rained down from the ceiling. There wasn't time left to weigh options. Evelyn wrapped the letters and glass plates in the canvas, hugging the bundle to her chest. I'll go first, she said. Whitaker shook his head. You're smaller, it makes sense. I'll hand things through and follow. He passed her the flashlight, then helped guide her into the opening. The earth was cool and damp beneath her palms. The air smelled of clay and old roots. For a second claustrophobia clawed at her chest, but she forced herself forward. This is the way they meant someone to escape, she thought. This is the path that was never used, or never finished. The tunnel angled downward, then leveled out. Behind her, Whitaker's shuffling movements echoed softly. The house creaked above like a living thing. After several yards, the passage widened slightly. Evelyn could almost crouch instead of crawl. The flashlight beam caught something glinting in the dirt ahead. She stopped. Half buried near the edge of the tunnel was a small metal object, corroded but recognizable, a fragment of a broken tag, the twin of the one in her pocket. She brushed away the soil. The engraving on this one was almost gone, worn smooth by time and moisture, but she could still make out the faint indentation of numbers rather than letters. Another tag? Whitaker's voice floated from behind her. Yes, she said. Not hers. Someone else's. They were sending more than one person through here. She imagined it, Ella Ruth, perhaps with another worker, crawling through this tunnel under cover of darkness, the house full of sleeping monsters above them. Clara, standing guard at the cellar door, ears straining for any sound. How far does it go? Whitaker asked. Evelyn pushed forward. The tunnel bent sharply, then sloped gently upward. A thin draft brushed her face, cool, moving air, smelling faintly of leaves and stagnant water. We're close to the surface, she said. A few more feet and the beam of the flashlight hit wood, planks arranged horizontally, reinforced from the inside. A trapdoor. Roots had grown through the cracks. Mud pressed in around the edges. She braced her shoulders against it. Whitaker, help me, she called softly. Together they shoved. For a moment the wood refused, held in place by decades of soil and neglect. Then, with a sudden crack, the plank shifted. A slice of gray daylight speared down into the tunnel, blinding after the darkness. Evelyn pushed harder. The trapdoor lurched open, spilling dirt into her hair. She pulled herself up and out. They emerged at the edge of a ravine. The forest pressed in around them, dense and wild. Below, a shallow, slow-moving creek wound through the overgrown ditch. The air hummed with insects and the distant caw of a crow. From here, Rowanwood was only partially visible through the trees, a pale, decaying shell sitting like a guilty conscience on the hill. Whitaker climbed out behind her, breathing hard. This is the path she tried to take, he said quietly. Evelyn turned slowly, taking in the surroundings. On a nearby tree, half hidden beneath lichen and moss, were faint knife marks, horizontal lines like tally marks, clustered at about shoulder height. Look, she said, pointing. They approached the trunk. Up close, the carvings were clearer. Notches. Rows of them. And beneath one set, barely legible, were letters scratched into the bark. Ella Ruth marked this too, Whitaker murmured. She made a map out of herself. Places she reached before they dragged her back. Evelyn felt a sharp grief for a woman she had never met. She almost made it, she said. If the tunnel reaches this far, she was right here. She could see the water. And they caught her before she crossed, Whitaker added. The ravine path was watched, just like Clara wrote. Silence settled over them, heavy and reverent. Then, from somewhere deeper in the trees, came the faint rumble of an engine. Evelyn tensed. We're not alone out here either. Whitaker motioned for her to crouch. They moved toward a thicket, staying low. Through the leaves they saw the source of the sound, a dark pickup truck idling on a narrow dirt track that skirted the back of the property. The driver's window was down, but the angle made it impossible to see the face clearly, only a baseball cap, a pale arm resting on the door, the glint of a phone screen in hand. The truck's bed held lumber. Concrete bags. Tools. Someone's been planning to reinforce something, Whitaker whispered. Maybe seal the cellar for good. The truck lingered for a moment, then rolled slowly away, disappearing around a bend. Evelyn exhaled only when the sound faded completely. We have to go to the authorities, she said. The sheriff, the state, someone. These plates, these letters, this is evidence of a crime that never ended. Whitaker nodded, but his expression was troubled. Whoever sent that photograph to you, he said slowly, isn't trying to protect their own legacy. They wanted this found. But whoever was just here. He glanced back toward the house. They want everything buried. Permanently. Evelyn clutched the canvas-wrapped bundle tighter. Then we're standing between two forces, she said. One trying to expose Ella Ruth's story, and one trying to silence it. She looked back at the tree with the carved initials, at the ravine path that had once represented a chance at freedom. Ella Ruth fought twice to escape, she said softly. Clara fought to preserve the truth. If we walk away now, the only side we're choosing is Rowan's. Whitaker met her eyes, the weight of the past and the present reflected in his gaze. Then we don't walk away, he said. We take this to the world. To courts, to historians, to anyone who will listen. Ella Ruth spent her life being silenced. We won't let her stay that way. Evelyn nodded. But as they began the long walk back toward the main road, the photograph pressed against her ribs. One thought gnawed at her: if the photograph had been in someone's possession all this time. If someone had known exactly where the plates and letters were hidden. Then the person who mailed that image to her wasn't just a stranger. They were a descendant of Rowanwood. And the question now was simple and terrifying: were they seeking justice or revenge? By the time Evelyn and Whitaker reached the county sheriff's office, dusk had begun to bleed across the Georgia sky. The air had turned cool, the light thin and metallic. Evelyn clutched the bundle of plates and letters as if it were a living thing. Whitaker kept glancing behind them, expecting, almost knowing, that someone might be following. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered, humming with stale electricity. The woman at the front desk peered over her glasses. Can I help y'all? Whitaker stepped forward. We need to speak to someone about historical evidence connected to Rowanwood Plantation. It's extremely urgent. At the mention of Rowanwood, the woman's expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. A muscle tightened in her jaw. She didn't ask what kind of evidence. She didn't ask why. She simply stood. I'll get the sheriff. Sheriff Nolan arrived a moment later, broad-shouldered, middle-aged, his badge dull with years of wear. He gestured them into his office and shut the door behind them. What's this about Rowanwood? He asked. Evelyn laid the wrapped bundle on his desk and began to explain, slowly at first, then faster as the weight of what they'd discovered pressed forward. She showed him the labor tag, the letters, the glass plates. Whitaker described the sealed cellar, the tunnel, the footsteps in the house, the truck waiting near the ravine. By the time they finished, Nolan's expression had gone stone hard. I know the Rowan family, he said finally. Been in this county since before any of us were born. Most folks won't speak about them openly. The last direct descendant died a few years back, Thomas Rowan. Lived alone. Kept to himself. Evelyn leaned in. Did he have children? Not officially. Unofficially? Whitaker pressed. Nolan sighed heavily. Rumors. A son. But no documentation. Never appeared in census or tax filings. If he exists, he lives off-grid. Folks around here don't ask questions. Evelyn exchanged the look with Whitaker. The person who mailed me the photograph, she said slowly, knew exactly where to send it. Knew what it meant. Knew it would lead us to the truth. Whitaker added, and the person at the estate today, who tried to seal us in the cellar, was working with tools, concrete, lumber. Someone with resources. Someone with a stake in keeping the past buried. Nolan nodded grimly. Which means you've stumbled into a family war. And you're holding the We*P*N. He tapped the plates gently. These, he said, are admissible in court. The letters, too. This isn't just history, this is evidence of kidnapping. Forced labor, torture, murder. Crimes that echo forward. If a Rowan descendant is involved, they'll want these back. And they won't care how. Evelyn felt a weight in her throat. Sheriff, what happened to Ella Ruth? Did she die there? Nolan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached into his desk and pulled out a thin, yellowed folder. This came from our archives, he said. Found during a flood cleanup years ago. No one knew what to do with it. Figured it was a lost report. But after what you've told me, he slid the folder toward them. Inside lay a single piece of paper, a coroner's document dated December 1891. The name field was left blank. Cause of death, blunt force trauma. Location. Where body was found, unspecified tract near the Rowan property line. But the age of the deceased, approximately 18 to 22. The S*X female. The description, small stature, healed. Neck abrasions, broken restraint cord still attached to wrist. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. It's her, she whispered. It's Ella Ruth. Whitaker swallowed hard. And she died running. Sheriff Nolan nodded. Whoever filed this report didn't have permission. That's why the name wasn't listed. Someone tried to give that girl dignity, even if they couldn't save her. Evelyn's voice trembled. Clara. Most likely, Nolan said. Clara Rowan vanished from the public record after 1892. Some say she left the state. Some say her father sent her away. Some say she stayed hidden right there on the land, refusing to let her father destroy everything. He closed the folder gently, almost reverently. What matters now, he continued, is that you've brought her story back. 2 months later, Rowanwood Plantation became the center of national attention. State investigators uncovered the entire sealed cellar, the post, the plates, the tunnel. Forensic teams analyzed the letters, confirming they were authentic and written by Clara Rowan. A historian identified the coroner's report as matching undocumented remains found decades earlier near the estate. News outlets called Ella Ruth the girl Georgia tried to erase. Descendants of those who suffered similar fates came forward. A memorial was proposed. Rowanwood, once a monument to cruelty, was slated to become a public historical site, its truth no longer buried beneath dust and silence. At the dedication ceremony, Evelyn stood on the hill overlooking the ravine, the path Ella Ruth nearly escaped through. Wind rustled the leaves. The creek murmured below. Whitaker joined her. She made it this far, Evelyn said softly. And we carried her the rest of the way. Whitaker nodded. Clara tried to save her memory. You finished what she started. Evelyn looked toward the old house, now cordoned off, its secrets finally exposed. Ella Ruth refused to forget she was free. She said, now the world will refuse to forget her. As they turned to leave, a small shape caught Evelyn's eye, something wedged between the roots near the ravine's edge. She knelt and picked it up. A fragment of carved wood. Old. Weathered. One corner still marked with a faint groove. A notch. One of Ella Ruth's last. Evelyn closed her hand around it. The past had finally spoken. And this time, someone listened.